2 laps. That's all it took to turn a solid afternoon into one of the most talked about moments in NASCAR's 2026 season, and to reignite a debate that the sport still hasn't fully answered. Where does racing aggression end, and where does retaliation begin? What you are about to hear is not just a crash story. It is a story about 2 drivers, a split-second decision at 180 miles per hour, a social media war that erupted within hours, and a ruling from NASCAR that left half the fan base cheering and the other half absolutely furious. Buckle up, because this one gets complicated fast. Texas Motor Speedway on May 3rd, 2026, the Würth 400, presented by Leaky Moly, was winding down in exactly the kind of chaotic, unpredictable fashion that makes NASCAR impossible to look away from. The race was at lap 266 of 267, 1 lap from the finish, and both Kyle Busch in the number 8 Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet and John Hunter Nemechek in the number 42 Legacy Motor Club Toyota were in a fierce battle for 12th place. Neither of these drivers was fighting for the win. Neither was in playoff contention at that exact moment. This was a battle for points, for pride, for track position, the kind of race within a race that happens 100 times every Sunday, but almost never makes national headlines. Almost. Both Busch and Nemechek had put together pretty solid days, and they were genuinely trying to finish inside the top 15 when everything fell apart in a matter of seconds. Here is where you need to pay very close attention, because the sequence of events matters enormously, and each side tells a very different version of the same story. Coming out of a chaotic late restart, Busch failed to gain any forward progress, and Nemechek got past him as the field crossed the line with 3 laps. That put Nemechek ahead, but Busch wasn't done. A lap later, Busch drove back underneath Nemechek through turns 1 and 2, nearly clearing the Legacy Motor Club driver for 12th at the exit of the corner, and that's when the 2 cars made contact for the first time. Busch's number 8 Chevrolet hit the outside wall, taking visible damage to the car. At this point, some would say the situation was still raceable, still within the limits of hard but fair competition. But what happened next is what sent the internet into complete meltdown. Nemechek worked his way around Busch and entered turn 3, and then Busch appeared to swerve right, making heavy contact that sent Nemechek hard in the outside barrier. Busch drove it deep to the inside of Nemechek, and, as one broadcaster put it, simply doored him. Nemechek was sent straight into the outside wall. Nemechek gingerly drove his badly damaged car down to pit road, asking over the team radio, why did he do that? And the race finished under green flag conditions. Within minutes of the checkered flag, both drivers were already typing. Nemechek posted on social media, not freaking clear, great day going, and just got wrecked. He used a very specific 3-letter word to describe Kyle Busch, the same word Brad Keselowski once famously used at Bristol years ago. The message was clear. Nemechek felt he had been deliberately taken out by a veteran driver who should have known better. But Kyle Busch was not going to sit quietly. Busch fired back immediately, posting, "I did not start this," and stating that Nemechek apparently didn't know where the right side of his car was in relation to the outside wall. Busch added, "There was 2 feet outside him, and I was judging my left side tires to the hash marks. Always know who you're racing beside." And then Busch did something that elevated this beyond the usual post-race he said. He shared actual SMT data from the race, turning what would normally be a he said situation into a deeper technical debate about positioning, awareness. The NASCAR community online did not know what to do with this. The video was going viral on X, formerly Twitter. Reddit was on fire. Fox NASCAR broadcast team, including Clint Bowyer and Kevin Harvick, had already weighed in live on air. The video of the crash went viral specifically because it looked so bad, and fans went absolutely nuts on social media. Almost everyone assumed a massive penalty was coming for Kyle Busch. When something this controversial happens in NASCAR, you can bet Denny Hamlin is going to have something to say about it, and he did not disappoint. On Monday's episode of his podcast, Actions Detrimental, Hamlin delivered a blunt take. "As far as the incident, I didn't see anything. No matter who's at fault for what happened on the backstretch. What happened in turn 3 was certainly unacceptable." That is a damning statement from one of the sport's biggest names, and it reflected what a large portion of the NASCAR garage was privately. This wasn't a fringe take from a social media keyboard war. This was a Hall of Fame caliber driver, a podcast host, and a team owner essentially saying that what Busch did in turn 3 crossed the line, regardless of the context that led to it. Tuesday came. The NASCAR penalty report dropped, and Kyle Busch's name was not on it. NASCAR announced that no fine, suspension, or points deduction would be imposed on Busch, with officials stating that race data and radio communication did not prove intent. The fan base, already divided, now fractured completely. If anyone was going to get dock points and write NASCAR a big check this week, fans had assumed it was going to be Kyle Busch, and instead, he walked away clean. But the reason NASCAR gave for this decision is actually fascinating, and it tells you a lot about how the sport's officiating works in the modern era. NASCAR Vice President of Race Communications Mike Ford, speaking on the Hauler Talk podcast, explained that the SMT data played the central role in the decision. The data showed that after the incident, Busch was turning the steering wheel all the way to the left just to go straight, indicating his car had suffered significant damage from the earlier contact. Ford stated that NASCAR's SMT expert, former Senior Vice President of Competition Scott Miller, dove deep into the data and determined that Busch's steering inputs showed him turning left to maintain control of the car, not turning right to deliberately hit Nemechek. In other words, NASCAR's official position was that the man with the damaged car may have had less control over his vehicle than the video suggests. Here is where the controversy truly explodes, because on the very same race day at Texas, there was another incident involving Ryan Preece and Ty Gibbs, and NASCAR handled that one very different. Based on its review of team radio, race video, and driver data, NASCAR punished Ryan Preece for his collision with Ty Gibbs, while the same type of review yielded no penalty at all for Kyle Busch. Preece was issued a $50,000 fine as well as a points penalty for his incident with Gibbs, who was sent hard into the turn 3 wall. So why did one driver get fined and penalized while the other walked away with nothing? The answer, according to NASCAR, came down to what was said over the radio. Preece had gone on what one outlet called a Hall of Fame radio rant before the incident, essentially telegraphing that he was going to wreck Gibbs. And then he did exactly what he said he was. Kyle Busch, by contrast, never said anything incriminating over the radio. And NASCAR's position was essentially that as long as you don't announce your intentions out loud, the data alone isn't enough to prove deliberate intent. Critics immediately pointed out the uncomfortable implication of this logic, that NASCAR was in effect rewarding drivers who are smart enough to stay quiet. To understand why this incident stings even more for some fans, you have to understand where Kyle Busch is in his career right now, because this is not a dominant champion in his prime making a questionable move while fighting for a title. Busch came into the Texas race ranked 27th in the Cup Series standings and left ranked 26th. And this was a race where he had genuinely looked like a top 10 car for much of the afternoon before the late race. This was also Busch's first race following a crew chief change on the number 8 RCR team, with Andy Street taking over from Jim Pullman. The team is clearly struggling, clearly trying to find answers, and clearly in need of clean laps and consistent finishes. Not a 20th place result born out of a vendetta in the final 2 laps. As one analyst noted, between an earlier incident at Bristol with Riley Herbst and now this situation with Nemechek at Texas, it is starting to feel like Kyle Busch is operating on a very short fuse in 2026. One headline summed up the sentiment bluntly: the benefit of the doubt is running out. This is the question that Reddit, NASCAR forums, and every garage conversation this week has been wrestling, and there is genuinely no clean answer. If you watch the raw footage without any context, it looks bad for Busch. It looks like a calculated move to door a competitor at high speed. Analysis from motorsport.com noted that from the number 42 in-car video, Nemechek was not quite as close to the wall as the cars directly ahead of him, and that he did lift once initial contact was made, adding some credibility to Busch's version of events on the backstretch point. But then the same analysis concluded that what happened in turn 3 was clearly retaliation, regardless of what came before. Fox Sports insider Bob Pockrass framed it this way: the question is how NASCAR looks at that frustration, given the sport has always maintained that if you get bumped, you can bump somebody back. Kyle Busch felt he had been bumped first. The truth as Pockrass noted, depends entirely on who you ask, and that is exactly why this story refuses to die. Here is the bigger picture that this incident forces NASCAR and its fans to confront. The sport is at an interesting crossroads right now. There's a new leadership era underway, and fans are genuinely asking whether we are entering a boys have it at 2.0 era, where hard racing is tolerated even when it crosses. The question now hanging over the garage is whether NASCAR is about to let aggression go unpunished as long as drivers keep quiet on the radio and the data can be interpreted charitably. For John Hunter Nemechek, this is a deeply frustrating result. He drove a strong race, got caught up in someone else's frustration, hit a wall at speed, and walked away with nothing to show for it except a damaged car and a 21st place finish. For Kyle Busch, the escape from punishment might actually be the worst outcome because without consequences, the pattern continues, the frustration builds, and the next incident is already being set up somewhere down the pit road. And for NASCAR fans watching at home, they got exactly what they always want, a moment that still has everyone talking days later, a controversy with no clean villain and no easy resolution, and a reminder that in this sport, the most dangerous place to be is sometimes right next to a veteran who feels he has been. Texas gave us that, and then some.